Well, I thought I'd talk today about the slippery slope logic with gun laws or gun restrictions, because the problem seems to be with all gun laws is that when they start putting some through, they start putting more through. And sooner or later you start having more and more firearms rights taken away, as what's happened here in the UK. They weren't anywhere near this bad to start with, but after 2 or 3 shooting events they used that to restrict more and more types of firearms. And now it's got to the stage where you have to go to a lot of effort to actually legally acquire and own a firearm. And then there's even more laws about where you can and cannot discharge it. So the problem is that once one law gets put in place, they'll see that as an excuse for another law. Let's take magazines for example. This isn't really an issue in the UK, but it could easily happen in somewhere like America, where they'll say 30 rounds is far too high capacity for this magazine. Only, a killer would want that many rounds in his gun. It will be limited to 15. And they'll generally only do this after there's been a mass shooting. So say you had that shooting in Colorado recently. They could use that as an example and then say, well, anybody who's opposed to these high capacity magazines is right, because if you actually are in favour of high capacity magazines, you're in favour of more shootings like this. And that's a very hard argument to argue against for a lot of gun owners. And that will be used as an excuse, quite sadly, because it's essentially just taking the victims and using them as a tool so they can try and take your guns away, or more rights away for your firearms ownership. And they'll use things like that, and that's what happened in the UK. We had the Dunblane and Hungerford massacre. Hungerford was where a crazy guy who should never have been allowed guns in the first place, he took a load of rifles and shot a load of people. And of course then, once he'd used that, they banned all self-loading rifles in calibre greater than 22, and basically that meant that, and then they had this huge firearms sort of buyback scheme where the government bought loads of firearms and destroyed them, where they basically said if you've got any gun that's not a 22, that's fires, is semi-automatic, self-loading, so FN fouls, anything like that, they were taken and destroyed. M16, AR-15 type rifles. And then we had Dunblane a few years later, where another guy who should never have been granted a firearms license in the first place went and shot a load of school children with some pistols and revolvers. And that was their excuse for banning pretty much every pistol in the UK, was, well, if you're in favour of pistols, you're in favour of, these baby killers going around shooting children. And to be brutally honest, since they banned handguns, we've had a lot more handgun homicides than we had before. These gangbangers in London and Manchester don't give a shit that guns have been banned, pistols have been banned, they'll still shoot each other with them anyway. They also shoot each other with submachine guns and machine pistols, and I think they've been banned since gun laws in the UK, so why have they got those? Because the laws don't do anything. To criminals at least, they only stop law-abiding people having guns. So the problem with these gun laws is that they're never going to stop criminals in the first place, because they're not going to legally acquire a gun anyway, so what do they care about the laws on a gun? And they just make it harder for civilians who legally want to own firearms for like recreational use or for defending their families. They make it very hard for them to get them. So you have bad guys with guns and the good guys who don't, and then of course they can always now say they might put a restriction on shotguns. They could have said, you see that Raoul Moat guy or whatever, he shot a policeman, shot his girlfriend, shot her lover. Well, that's because shotguns shouldn't be allowed for you anymore, and then they could take the shotguns away. Thankfully they didn't, but that'd be a useful idiot for them to use to take the guns away. So yeah, that's my rant over the slippery slope of firearms restrictions, and I'd say this to anyone who's in America or any countries that still have quite good gun laws: just be careful who you vote for or whatever, because there's a lot of politicians who will, if they get the chance, take your firearms away or firearms rights away, because they don't like the idea of civilians owning guns, because they could turn against the politicians and the politicians turn against the people. Well, thank you for watching. Bye.